Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. All right, today we are going to take a little look at the Dawnshade game. Dawnshade Prophecy of the Watcher's Prophecy. That's the full name here. So I'm not going to call this a review because I haven't played the game enough times or much at all, to tell you the truth, to call it a review. I have, however, played enough times to know that the game just is not for me. And I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about why that is. There are some things that I do like about this game. For one, I think the production values are just outstanding. I mean, everything looks really nice. I like the components. I like the cardboard is thick. It has pretty good art. The character boards are kind of, they're oddly shaped for sure, but they are nice. The cards are nice. And even the little, or not the little, but the big kind of storybook has some good art in it, and the writing is decent. It's, I've read much worse writing in a board game, in a kind of a narrative board game. So it's up there with like some of the better board game writing. And some of the mechanisms are interesting. What is most interesting in a positive way, actually, it's kind of a positive and a negative. It's the double-edged sword of this game. It's just how many different things the designers crammed into one game. And that leads me to kind of like the main issues I have. It's just the two main parts, for me, just they don't gel together in a satisfactory way. And those two main parts are like the adventuring and then how you determine the outcome of all of your challenges. Most of the challenges in this game are actually little dexterity mini games. And it just doesn't really fit in an adventure game, at least as far as I'm concerned. I would have liked like a couple little dexterity things is a good idea. I have praised Warhammer Quest Silver Tower multiple times for having little kind of weird mini games, but it's never the focus. And Dawnshade, a lot of the game, the focus is actually on dexterity games. And I didn't get that sense during the Kickstarter campaign. I thought that there was just going to be maybe a couple little dexterity games that would kind of augment or offset or add a little spice to the game, but that's really not the case. You're doing a lot of dexterity stuff in this game. So let's talk about the main thing I do like, and that is this board here. This is the adventure board. This is the board that you're going to be moving this token on, which represents your kinship, which represents the party of adventurers. You are going to pick a starting hex, and that's going to be where your starting village is. And your starting village is going to have a number of different outposts that you can visit, such as guilds and shops and places where you can buy and level up and do your adventure prep. And then in each game, you are going to be building a stack of quest tiles. And these tiles will have certain things like other outposts that you can visit to do certain things. They might have these journey tiles, which those just represent your places where your party is out journeying, going on a journey across the land. So that's just going to kind of take up time. And then you can have more journey tiles. And then you will have some event tiles, which one of the event tiles is out on the board already. So this one here corresponds to event number 15. And you might have a Watcher's Temple, which is a place that you can go to kind of get the benefits of the prophecy of the Watchers, that the different gods that are reigning over the land. And then you can also have battles, which these are where you're going to be fighting. And finally, you're going to have your final threat. And what this does is this comes out at a certain point when you are venturing on the map. Basically, each time you move to a new hex, you count how many spaces you have moved, and you're going to set a threat level at the beginning of the game. And for each space that you move through, you're going to add one to that threat. And when you reach that certain threshold, then that triggers the end game for that scenario. And another thing I do like is the campaigns are short. The whole campaign is really only 3 games, and you play this game, this map game, for 3 games. You have an epic, you have a threat, you have an epic challenge at the end, a boss fight usually, and then that's going to be the whole campaign. So the campaigns are manageable. I like how you build your quest, your tile quest deck from the available tiles, and I like how the events correspond to all the different events in this book. So you will have 20 different non kind of they're not, I don't want to say non-combat because there are some combat things, but 20 different narrative events, and each one of them has a handful, usually 3 different ways that you can approach the event, 3 different choices. And then there are a number of different battle events, these red events, and that depends on the level of your party, of your characters. You will face off against different battle scenarios. And then the epic threat, the major threat, also depends on the level of your party. And so there are a number of different epic threats or major threats that you will have to overcome to win each scenario in the campaign. So it does a really good job of keeping things in balance, of presenting a short campaign that is actually finishable, and a really cool sense of adventure while you are moving around the map, trying to connect the tiles and pathways. There's a little bit of tile placement because you want to make sure that you can get to places where you need to go without moving too many spaces, generating more threat, because you want to try to stay adventuring quite a long time in order to power up your characters. And then you can also move around and you can collect these different bonuses that the watchers have placed out for you. And these are going to give you bonuses. Usually for a combat, they will allow you to do certain things. The main problem that I do have with the game, and the thing that is really keeping me from even wanting to play it at all anymore, is most of the time when you are faced with a challenge, what you are going to be doing is some kind of mini game that is a dexterity game. So there are a number of different, so if you turn to the rule book here, we can see that the different challenges are going to be, there are, let's see here. So there are stat challenges. Stat challenges represent the kinship testing their skills based on collective stats. So you will take your battle board here. You will look at your defense value on one of your characters. You will take a number of defense dice that correspond to that. And then you will roll on this battle chart here. And you will roll, and it's kind of like shuffleboard. You have a -1, a +0, a +1, a +2, and a -1. And you're trying to roll these dice, and you're trying to look for these red pips there. And you want to get those rolled in places where they're going to add a certain total to those pips. And you have to reach a certain threshold to overcome the challenge. So each player is going to roll their dice, and then you want to try to get it into that +2. So that's a little bit of a dexterity challenge there. And then you also have things where you have to, you might discover some treasure. You might discover a treasure chest. And to get the treasure inside, to unlock the treasure, you might have to do a little lock-picking mini game. And for that, you're going to set up these red health tokens in a certain order depending on how hard the challenge is. And then you have to take one of your character's tokens, and you have to roll your token through to the end in between these 2 white dots without knocking over any of these stacks of red tokens to show that you have picked the lock. So there I would have successfully picked the lock on that particular challenge. And you might have to set these up in different ways. And the more red things you set up kind of corresponds to a harder lock that you have to pick. So that's another way that you will have to overcome a challenge. And then there is a couple like poker, not poker, but gambling style mini games where you're going to be flipping over these cards here, these little like initiative hit cards, and you're going to be looking for certain symbols, and you can bet money, and you can, as long as certain symbols line up, you might get more money. There's a dice mini game where you're going to be taking a couple dice and you're going to be trying to roll. You're going to be betting, and then you're going to be rolling, and you're looking for certain combinations of those dice. And then you have what is basically a game of Beyblade. And so if you were playing with two players, each of you is going to take one of your cog bots and you're going to spin those. And the last one standing is the winner. And they're going to get some money or some additional XP. You have challenges where you are going to be taking a stack of red chips like this, and you're going to be putting your cogbot there, and then you're going to be flipping those, trying to land close to certain spots there, doing damage to certain enemies. There are sliding challenges where you're going to be sliding these tokens on certain, trying to get close to certain spots. So like all of the skill challenges, all of the skill checks in this game correspond to some kind of little mini game that has to do with tossing dice or tossing chips or rolling chips or spinning chips. And the main reason why that doesn't work for me is that as a game where the game was really kind of touted as having this kind of complex character progression where you could build your character in a variety of different ways. They could be a spell sword or a melee build or a straight mage build or something like that. But all of the ways that you overcome the challenges, except for combat in this game, are done through dexterity mini games, which have absolutely like no bearing on how you've built your character. It has to do with you as the player and how good you are at flicking and rolling and sliding things. So the main way that your characters in the game are overcoming challenges has nothing to do really with how they have built themselves out, how they have progressed, how they have leveled up. And that's a huge disconnect. This is for an RPG. I don't want to be, as the player, I don't want to be the one who is having to overcome the challenge. I want my characters to overcome the challenge because of the way I leveled them up. And speaking of leveling up, one of the main things you're going to be doing throughout the game is you're going to be trying to keep a balance between all of these different gods and their powers. So you have like nature and what is this? Sun, fire, mountain, air, and water. And you have these chips here. And at certain points in the game, usually during combat, you can roll a Vaki dice. And the Vaki dice will allow you to take these chips here, and these chips correspond to different gods and different prophecies, or different watchers, I should say. And as you take certain ones and spin certain ones, you're going to be moving these little cubes up and down, trying to maintain a balanced, just a balanced outlook on life as far as like the different gods go. And if you ever get out of balance, that can be bad. And if you get out of balance, you might have this cataclysm that'll come out, and it'll kind of haunt you for the rest of the campaign. But while this is kind of interesting, and you are going to be wanting to get different elements in order to spin those elemental chips to do your character's super abilities, I found that while I was playing, the chances to get these chips they just weren't happening enough to make these different skills a viable solution, a viable option, when I thought that they would have been more necessary. And I found myself kind of ignoring this board here, this balance board, except for the 3 dials where you're going to be keeping track of your experience, your threat, and your level. Those are used all the time. But I found that I just didn't really need to pay attention to this in order to have more fun. It seemed like this kind of cool concept that just wasn't utilized enough. And again, these really only come out in combat when you need to use one of your skill cards. But most of the time, most of the challenges were these little dexterity challenges where this didn't really seem to add anything to those dexterity challenges. And so there's just this kind of just big disconnect between those two parts of the game. I think this should have been advertised more as a dexterity game. Something like, what's that one game? I completely forgot. Castle Panic, right? Castle Panic is a dexterity game. There was another one too where you had to do like silly things where you had to like stand on one foot and flip a chip. That was kind of an adventure game. But those games are advertised as being dexterity first, themed dexterity games. This would have been a much better game if it was advertised as a themed dexterity game. If they really leaned into that thematic dexterity style game, then it would have been something really unique. They could have simplified the adventure part, simplified the RPG part, even probably gotten rid of it altogether because it really doesn't amount to much, and had a narrative, thematic dexterity game be the focus. And that would have been something unique and kind of cool. And I think people would have, if people would have expected that, then they would have known what it is more going into it. There are ways that you can overcome your stat challenges, your challenges without the dexterity mini games, but they really amount to nothing more than rolling 2 dice and looking for certain symbols. And then once again, the way you've built your characters doesn't really have any impact on that part. So there still is that disconnect. And also, playing dexterity games as a solo player is really kind of boring. I mean, when you're playing these dexterity games and you're rolling good, and you're like bouncing dice off and doing cool things, you want that camaraderie around the table to like give a cheer or a boo or something. And so I think this game would probably also be much more fun if you were playing with a group. And so for me also, since I do most of my gaming solo these days, that's another way where it's just not hitting the mark. And that's too bad. I was really hoping this would be one of those kind of those under the radar games that I could really champion, but I just don't think it's for me. I think this game could be for some people. However, I think some of the nature of this balance board and keeping track of this could be a little more complex for people who might really be into the dexterity part. And so there may be this weird place, this weird middle ground where the game doesn't appeal enough to a crowd looking for a lighter game, nor does it really appeal to a crowd looking for a heavier game. It's kind of in this weird nebulous middle zone where I'm not quite sure who the audience is. One thing I do know is that I am just not part of that audience, and that's a real shame. I really wanted to like Dawnshade, but again, this isn't really a review. I just wanted to talk about some of the reasons why I'm very quickly. I'm just going to add this to the sell pile. It's not a game for me. I don't think it is necessarily a bad game. I just think this game is going to have a really hard time finding its audience, and that audience is going to be a very niche audience, and that's okay. This game might really connect with a very small group of people, and for them, I think they're going to have a fun time. But for me, it's just not the game for me, so I am going to pass it on and sell it. So, all right, guys, well, I hope you enjoyed taking this really kind of quick, just brief overview look of Dawnshade, the Watcher's Prophecy, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.